Hey, okay, so this movie coming out, or if it hasn't already, Little Women. And I've seen several people say, again? Look, I love the story Little Women. The 1984 version is, I think, one of the best adaptations of the story. And probably because I grew up watching the anime version, and I was animated out. So I think that was the first live action version that I ever saw, and that's probably why it has such a special place in my heart. It has nothing to do with Christian Bale, so don't get on my case. We all know I love Christian Bale. I think he's wonderful. But when it comes to Little Women, I decided to look up silent film because I figured, there had to be a silent film. And I was coming up with nothing. Well, I usually get these lists of lost films. It was on the list. Well, I decided to, find any kind of information and do a video anyway, because I've done lost films before. Turns out there are two. There are two Little Women silent films. But I'm going to go a little bit further because it turns out that Little Women was a very, very popular story. I mean, very, very popular. More so, I mean, it's popular now, and it's been popular ever since I was a very small child. And I'm sure that there are a lot of you that will say that, yeah, it was popular even before, like in the 70s, 60s, whenever. It's always been popular. It was very popular. So we're gonna talk about this. And so we're going to elaborate on the silent film, on the two lost silent films. And so here we go. Little Women had a Broadway show, and it ran from 1912 to 1913, and it did have a revival in 1916. And I mean, when I was looking up stuff on this, the fact that it had a stage play, and it turns out that it was a huge success. It was a hit. It was always sold out, and that's that's one of the reasons it had a revival. I mean, and I look at the pictures of it, and it looks like so much fun. They need to revive it again. And I mean, they talk about here the fact that there was cosplay for readers. They had a little women's club. Uh, Young girls would dress up as the March sisters in this club and reenacting their lives and everything. I mean, we thought that the Sherlock Holmes fandom from the 1890s would, they would, I mean, they mourned his death. I mean, this is just, there are so many things that are just, it was turned into a franchise because there's also like Joe's Boys, there's Little Men, there's, if you've never read Little Men, it's a fun book. It really is. I've read all of those. I love Louisa May Alcott. Um, it's the sequel to Little Women, and I mean, there's just all these different things that they did, and it just leads up to the Broadway show. And so, I mean, the cosplay thing was like, we still do that. this is this is amazing. People haven't changed. But I remember doing that when I was a little kid. We had those, like, the boxcar children and we had the Saddle Club books and everything. So we had those books, and there were clubs for those books. So, oh my gosh, that would have been so much fun. And you have to remember, I mean, this was even before radio. So radio didn't exist. So the fact that this happened, it makes me I'm just, oh. Now the other thing that I found very interesting, Theodore Roosevelt. Now you have to think about Theodore. I absolutely loved talking about him in my history class. Maybe it was a teacher. I absolutely adored her. She was a wonderful teacher. But we would talk about Theodore Roosevelt. Now he take 5 seconds to just think of the kind of guy that he was. And it says in his post-presidential autobiography, Theodore Roosevelt admits that, at the risk of being deemed effeminate, he greatly liked girls' stories and worshipped Little Women as a young boy. I mean, and I don't mean it to sound like I'm making fun of him at all. I think that's wonderful. I mean, the fact that he's saying this in his autobiography. I mean, so yeah. And so again, in 1912 and 1913, that was the Broadway show, and then in 1916 was the Broadway revival. 1917, the very first film was released, and it was released in Britain. It was directed by Alexander Butler, and I will of course have all of this information for you, and I'm not gonna there really isn't that much information about the first film adaptation for for Little Women. Just the director, the producer, and the cast. From what it sounds like, because it says the screenplay is by Louisa May Alcott and it's based on her story, so it sounds like they stuck to everything. You know how a lot of times they'll embellish a little bit. It sounds like Alexander didn't do that. And you know, Walt Disney wanted to do 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea scene by scene by scene. And everybody said, no, you can't do that. This is going to be a really long movie if you do that. No, you gotta take stuff out. It turned out to be a pretty good movie, but yeah, if he had put everything and the kitchen sink into that movie, I think people would have been walking out. No, he came up with a pretty good movie. But this is different, though. You can put the entire book into a movie, and it sounds like that's what they did. If it says screenplay by Louisa May Alcott, so because a lot of times I see these and talk about these, and it'll say screenplay by someone else, so somebody else wrote it for movie and for film. Now, the next year, Hollywood in America, America released Little Women. Now, here's the interesting thing about the American version. It says here that it was expensively produced by World Film, an independent company founded by famed Broadway producer William A. Brady. He wasn't able to find a distributor, and so the project was put on the back burner for an entire year. So originally, it was supposed to be released in 1917, the same year as the very first, the British film. So if he had found a distributor, I'm sure that we would be wondering which one was released the same year, because I'm sure that they'd be like, well, this one was released first. No, this one was released first. Because you know that there would be, it was mine. No, it was mine. Because you always want to be first, especially with something like this, because of how popular it was. I mean, this was like the Star Wars of its day. Think of it that way. From what I'm reading and all the information that I'm looking up and everything, I'll of course link everything in the description so that you can get an idea of just how popular it was in its time. So yeah, it was. I mean, I love the story. I always have. I just had no idea how popular this story was when it was released. And of course, books were the entertainment of its time. You know, you think about Sherlock Holmes and how popular it was. So, so anyway, the 1918 uh, film was picked up by Paramount Pictures. Now, one of the actors in that film, Lynn Hammond, he in the film plays Professor Bayer, but he was in the Broadway show. He played Mr. March, and he was, of course, in the Broadway show and in the Broadway revival in 1916. So, anyway, um, so again, I will have all this information for you in the description below. Um, I just, I searched for a Little Women silent film, wasn't finding anything, and it showed me the 1918, and that's when I fell into this rabbit hole and found all this information. So I wanted to share it for you guys, and I'll make sure to put all of it in the description so that you can see it. And so yeah, that's Little Women.